why it does that. Maybe it's time for a new camera. I don't know. In any case, we'll talk about him next class, because he's an answer to David Hume, we think, in some respects. Bertrand Russell doesn't think so, but we'll have to get into Hume a little bit to see why that is. And then the uncertainty. I put down John Stuart Mill. Put him down there. I always have trouble remembering how to spell Stuart because there's several different ways of spelling it. I think it's S-T-U-A-R-T, Mill. Why uncertainty? Well, John Stuart Mill is a contemporary of Charles Darwin. In fact, Mill publishes one of his main important books on liberty the same year that Charles Darwin publishes why do I have trouble remembering the evolution one, the book, the same book. What the heck? Yeah. Yes, that one. This is the privilege of getting old, right? Origin of the Species. So, yeah, it's 1859, right? Yeah, 1859. So that's the same year, but I will actually argue that both of them are influenced by Hegel and the Romantic philosophers in Germany who talk about kind of an organic view of things, and that everything in a sense grows or evolves in that sense. So they don't use the word evolution, but that narrative is an evolving one, and we think that starts like in 1807 in that time period. It actually influences Mill's grandfather and Darwin's grandfather. So that's the generation that's beginning to be influenced by that idea that there's kind of a constant change. And so Mill is focused on the idea that ethics, our ethical theory, unlike Aristotle, who's going to say it should be based on what's flourishing for me, or Hume, that it's the community, Mill argues that our sense of ethical value is evolving and changing, and as a result, it's improving. So it's not just changing from any old thing to any old thing. It's moving in a particular direction where we're becoming better ethically. So it's progress, right? So Mill adopts the idea that there's uncertainty with regard to what's right and what's wrong. It's kind of like science. We don't really know the answer to this. We have a hypothesis. So in a sense, a particular ethical view is like a hypothesis of how we ought to act. But then we learn from our experiences, and we might decide, women ought to have equality, and so instead of just letting males dominate everything, we start letting females have a voice, and so on. And by the way, Harriet Taylor was his wife, and he got awful lot of that from her, etc. But so uncertainty is his point of view. Certainty is Kant's, and I think I said as far as I got last class that if you think of this corner as birth, and we come in here and typically head over this way, thanks to a good family life and mother that cares for us, and we learn to speak, and we learn what everybody believes in our family and so on. We're moving in this direction to be certain and focused on the community, which I would argue you end up with the most conservative point of view over here. And I think I put the Pope up here as an example for me. Although Pope Francis, by the way, has been criticized by a lot of people because he's a little bit more open to change. And that's a conflict in a church that's focused on continuity, right? So that's kind of interesting. I put him up there. And then when we had a chance to laugh is where I put the liberals down here. Because in a sense their view is that they want to help the community as best they can, but just like scientists, they're not really sure what the best answer is. So they end up arguing among themselves. They don't actually have an agreed point of view of how we can help the community. The scary one I put over here, and that's suicide, is the individual that psychologically totally uncertain, but also at the same time just focused on themselves and not physically connected through a community to friends, significant others, and so on. That's scary because they end up, even if they're physically healthy, which of course your mental state can affect your health, but at the same time say that they're not physically damaged in a way that makes them mentally unable to cope with society. And that's kind of scary, but here in Alaska, I believe we have roughly 25% of the population identified as having fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, which makes it very difficult for people to drive, to have agency in the sense that they have a plan on how they're going to accomplish things, and they know the logical order or how they should go about doing it. I think driving, though, is an excellent example. I know the teacher out at Chugiak High School took my one son out, for his first driving lesson. Came back almost immediately, said, "This kid cannot learn to drive. Do not teach this person. Do not let this person. No driving for this person." And we knew by then that yes, that son had fetal alcohol, and was already having trouble. I remember when he first learned how commas worked in reading, and he was so furious. I was just couldn't understand what the heck was going on, but he was arguing with my wife. She was trying to explain, it's like taking a breath in your sentence. No, it isn't. We just couldn't understand him because the way his computer was working and the way what we think of as a normal personal computer, your neck top, didn't work for him. Didn't have all the connections that you need in order to tell time, manipulate money, do math, play trumpet in the school orchestra. We got him a trumpet, nope. He sat there with the horn looking at everyone, just absolutely couldn't understand what was going on. So, but that's one particular point in, what we think of as a spectrum, right? So it depends on how much alcohol the birth mother was drinking, when, in the development of the fetus, and so on. I guess you get a lot of that in a lot of other classes. But that kind of illness is, aside, a perfectly healthy person could end up in a situation where they feel like they have no clue what their life should be all about. And they're not connected to enough of a community for them to feel loved and wanted and feel like there's hope and direction that they can learn from others and so on. There are folks there. I know some. That's really scary, trying to imagine folks living in that situation. But our typical education, especially in high school, pulls people down from certitude into uncertainty. History is especially important that way. History is a art that really developed with the German Romantic period, and the idea that humans are developing and creating new ideas, progressing in their government, progressing in their moral values, and so on. All of that comes from a historical point of view. But you learn early that, say, Christianity became the religion of the empire because of sociological, historical events, right? So it's not like religion is certitude, Instead, it's this developing point of view. So we're pulled down here, but I think the typical position for an American is somewhere in the middle, because culturally we're aware of all of these, right? So we're definitely drawn to self-flourishing. We definitely want to have that. We have a lot of that in our political worldview and so on. But we're also convinced that we have to be part of a loving community. It takes a village and all that sort of thing. At the same time, science is a dominant narrative, meta-narrative for us, and science is essentially, one hypothesis after another, right? As the expression goes, one funeral after another. Science advances. Hypothesis sounds great. Everybody starts believing it, and everybody's trying to figure out what's wrong with it, and eventually you find something wrong with it, and you have to discard it and move on to a better hypothesis, right? So that's the way you begin approaching everything, right? And yet at the same time, we still certainly have an impact from religion and Kant, that there are certain things that are certain. So, and where we end up. So I will argue, at least in the course, that pragmatism is the philosophy of the United States. Still, we have good individuals that we can look at towards the end of the course that will give us a sense of how American philosophy really is pragmatic. So that's, I wanted to finish this little cognitive map. There are other examples of cognitive maps out there. My favorite is one by Francis Fukuyama in one of his books. I'm trying to think of the name of the book offhand, but in any case, I remember being pleased to discover that independently, I hadn't seen his map before, but independently he has almost exactly the same map, except he has the sides reversed left and right. But that was kind of neat. Francis Fukuyama. I should find that book. Let's see. In case you're interested. The Great Disruption, I think, is the book. Ray isn't here, so I can refer to the first book source that comes up, which is Amazon. I don't know why she doesn't like Amazon. But in any case, there you go. All right. Questions on my map? If you're interested in this, cognitive mapping. It's supposed to make abstract thinking kind of easier, because you can pictorially see the relationships between certain ideas and so on. But these are not actually contradictory, so this doesn't mean that in the middle we're sitting here believing all sorts of contradictory things. They're contrary, maybe, which is not the same as a contradiction. So let's look at David Hume. So notice his I still use these old notes, but you can actually just go to an even better source. Go to the Stanford or